Lego, could you give us the topic real quick? I think you came up with it.
Actually, hydrogen did come up with it.
Okay.
My understanding is debating the workplace democracy, the merits of
Yeah,
workplace democracy. You go ahead with that,
yeah,
hydrogen.
yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, I'll just go ahead. I have no problem with workplace democracy. Like, I think in some aspects it probably should be implemented, but what I have a problem with is kind of like maybe like a socialist government or regime just forcing everyone to make workplace democracy mandatory. I have a major problem with that. And from my own personal opinion, I do have some other problems with workplace democracy. But mainly, I have a problem with the government or any type of socialist authority, like forcing a certain business or co op or whatever to be a workplace democracy or not be a workplace democracy for that matter.
So you're not against it in principle, you're only against it in practice.
No, I'm kind of ambivalent to it in principle. What I'm against is it being compelled or a certain company forced to become a workplace democracy. Like if we're say there's a company with 20 people and for some reason everyone decides to make it a workplace democracy, I have no problem with that. That's good for them.
But in our current system, you'd agree that let's say 90% of the workers wanted it to be a democracy, but the owner class decided they did not. There would be no method for them to become the owners other than to acquire the capital for it, right?
Um, I mean, I may agree with part of that statement. I definitely disagree that 90% of workers want a workplace democracy.
That's
I
not
mean,
what I'm
and
saying.
let
I'm
me just
asking.
ask you,
It's a hypothetical. Like, if not, let's say, like,
okay. Hypothetically, if
yeah,
90%,
they voted
hypothetically,
on
if 90% of workers wanted a workplace democracy, I would imagine even if it wasn't forced, most businesses would operate on the model of a workplace democracy because a business needs workers, and so they have to be amenable to what the workers want.
it. Okay, that's an empirical claim. I don't know if I would agree with that, but you're saying that you're not against it in principle, then,
No, I mean, I'm not against it in principle. Like
because
if
you
a
said
workplace,
ambivalent. You said ambivalent. I don't know. Like, it's a pretty easy question. Like, do you think that it would
so
be viable to have workplace democracy, or do you not think it's
do I think
viable?
it would depend on the business model, right? So let me give you an example, okay? Let me give you an example. Say we have, I don't know, a small law firm with 10 employees. Then a workplace democracy might actually be a good idea. The 10 employees kind of discuss, they vote, they make. They're all like attorneys, so they all kind of understand what's going on. They make decisions about where the firm is going. Um, you know, let's take another example. Maybe something like I don't know, just a large restaurant chain, maybe like Taco Bell. I mean, does it really make sense to have like every part-time like Taco Bell worker, even like high schoolers working there 10 hours a week to vote on like what the company should do? No, that doesn't make sense to me. It's going to result in like probably a terrible company.
So I don't know if
So essentially what I'm saying is it's situational.
situational. Okay, so that
Yeah.
I just want to make it clear that you're not against it in principle, but you just
I have
No,
don't
a
I'm,
want.
I'm
question.
not
Can we
against it. I
inject
will
your
admit
shit
I'm not
to
against
the
Oh,
it.
debaters?
Israel,
People?
we're doing an official debate right now.
Oh, I thought it was informal. My bad.
No, no problem.
Yeah, you're good, bro.
You're good. So yeah, I guess my disagreement then would be that I think one, it is preferable to have a workplace democracy, and
Okay.
two, I think that we ought to bring it about. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that we should literally force every business to become a workplace democracy overnight. I think that would be absurd and lead to like social upheaval that wouldn't be laudable, regardless of what your intentions were. But I would say we can definitely set it up so that over time businesses were to gravitate more towards a co-op model. And I think that it's not as simple as just all the voters work and they give themselves raises, right? I think that we
Yeah.
still need to have some kind of partnership with stakeholders, right? And it wouldn't be like workers are just deciding arbitrarily to run something into the ground. I think a lot of
Yeah.
what you're
So
saying, so coming from, let me just finish. a lot of
Yeah,
what you're
my bad.
saying, it seems as though it's coming from a fear of mob rule and not from any inadequacy on the worker's part.
Yeah, so there are a couple of parts to that. Let me first say, you mentioned a co-op. So I view workplace democracy and a co-op as two different things. When I think of a co-op, I essentially think of the workers owning part of the company. Like in our current system, that'd be like the workers owning stock in the company. I'm actually for that in principle. Like I think that's a good thing. Um, Even for like lower paying jobs, I think it's not a bad idea to, pay workers in like company stock. Um, Maybe you view a co-op differently, but like I guess the way I view it is workers actually owning part of the company. Um, as far as workplace democracy, see, one of the problems I have is that there are all these decisions in a company, especially in a large company. You're gonna have decisions that require a lot of like brain power, a lot of time, and a lot of information to make an informed decision. Um, so I think there are two models of workplace democracy, and you can tell me like which one you support. So I think there's one model is that is direct democracy. So I don't know, say there's like a fast food chain with 5 restaurants, and they're trying to open a new restaurant on the north side of town. Well, they say, okay, we've got 2 spots to open this restaurant on the corner of 5th and 6th Street, or on the corner of 12th and 15th Street. Which one should we buy? And then all the workers vote on that. So that's one model. The other model would just be elect representatives. So you elect the CEO, you elect like the secretary, you elect whoever you want. I guess I have a problem with both of those. And that for the first one, I think it's very clear workers probably don't have the time, the energy, or the information. Plus, it's actually very, I would say, inefficient because then everyone has to be informed. Whereas if it's just a few people informed, you know, that takes, there's more resources. Like those people can work on something else. And then the second thing, I think it would kind of be more of a popularity contest. I think the people who, in that context are the smartest or the would make the best decisions. I don't think they would rise to the top if it was just through elections. I mean, let me give you an example. Like, do you think either Joe Biden or Donald Trump is like the best person to run the country? I would say no, actually.
Okay, I mean, we can go into this notion of meritocracy and table the workplace democracy for a second, because to me, you're making a mistake in your assumptions, right?
Okay.
So, from what I'm getting from you, it sounds somewhat elitist and also buying into what I would call like the myth of meritocracy. So, to me, our part of what makes our society function and what makes people complacent with the way that things are is because that there's this kind of narrative that we live in a meritocracy, when in reality the kind of expertise that you're talking about does not exist in the owner class. Like, it's, you own the capital and you can afford to pay whoever you want to actually run the thing. So you running the business doesn't give you any particular expertise in that business. Now, I'm not saying that it's the case that everyone who owns or runs a business or is a CEO has no clue what they're doing with the business. But what I would make the case is that there's no connection between you owning and running a business and you actually knowing anything about that business under capitalism. There's no necessary link. In fact, the only thing that you know that is necessarily causal is that you own the property or you have the money to buy the property, right? That's all you can say about the causal connection. Now, it may be the case, given whatever era we live in, that you'll have more or less people that have expertise running the businesses. So I think a lot of tech companies, it just so happens since they're newer, that they have more people running them that happen to have, a stake in, or sorry, not a stake. They have knowledge about the thing that they're running. But
Yeah.
the older that companies go and the longer, like, those kind of industries have been around, the less and less you have people that actually know what the business is like and what the actual like processes are that go under it, and the more they hire that out to experts on the panel. So I would say you would actually have to prove to me a much more intimate connection between the idea of owning and the ability to have technical knowledge about the thing that you're doing.
I'll actually say that's a really good point, and I would agree with you. It's not a necessary link. I'll give you an example. I could be, I'm not, but I could be lucky enough to be born like the kid of someone who did really well and started a company, and then it gets left to me, and I know nothing about it. So I agree it's not necessary. But what I would argue is that on average, if you look at like actual like these companies in the real world, the executives, the CEOs, the people at the top of the company, on average, they know more, they're more informed, they're more educated about the specific task of making decisions. I'm not saying they're more, I'm not saying they're smarter overall, but than the average worker.
I would say that, okay, you need to, if you're going to make that claim, we've established that the only necessary connection is between having the, the ownership rights or having the capital to buy the ownership rights. If you're going to make the case that the average owner is smarter, you need to back that up in some way, right? You can't because to me,
Okay.
we're going to,
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, to me, we're going to assume that because there's a whole industry around credentialism that we have now, where you go to school for this fake degree that you can either buy or slide through. You get passed through really easily, and then all of a sudden you're qualified to do this thing. And if you have the right connections, then you'll go into this sector, and then you'll have a bunch of people propping you up who are already in there because you are friends or your family or your went to college with them, right? So to me, there's always an alternate narrative. I'm not saying that's always the case, but there's always the potential for that alternate narrative to explain the situation rather than what you're saying. So to me, you have to give me much more evidence if you're going to make that claim.
Sure, I'll give you another piece of evidence. People in actual executive roles and that are making these decisions, they have experience in making these decisions. The average worker does not.
So, but here you have a correlation, causation, chicken and the egg situation, right? Because workers don't have experience making these decisions because they're not given the chance to make these decisions. So this is why I say, I don't want to, upheave all of society overnight and give workers a bunch of responsibilities they're not prepared for. But if we were giving them more and more responsibility, and the system was designed to give them more democracy in the workplace, then I don't see why they would not get that experience and make those decisions, and there would be no problem.
Okay.
Surely there's a way to educate and inform, and there's a way to run elections in such a way that people are informed, right?
I think I think you can kind of do that, but I'd say even looking at, do you live in America? I'm not.
Yes.
Okay. Look at our elections. I'd say a lot of people are tremendously misinformed. Look at the whole COVID vaccine thing. A lot of people think it's, it's going to kill you. I'd say that's pretty blatant misinformation that a lot of people think. So, can you inform people on elections? I guess, but it doesn't always work out perfectly. I still believe in democracy and the government, but
well, I think the only argument I would have to make is that it's possible. I don't think I need to show, because what you're giving me is a specific example of an election gone wrong. I can point to plenty where they go right? So what you would need to show is that on this scale, on this level, you cannot trust the people to decide their own fate, or we cannot give them more responsibility, or that they could not adapt to having more responsibility and eventually gain the skills needed to have that responsibility. Now, I would argue that workplace democracy would not function like an election in the way that you're thinking, because it's on a totally different scale. There's not mass media within it. Only to the extent that we allow it. But also, elections are deliberately designed to have certain candidates make it to the end in our system. Whereas I don't know that has to be the case with workplace democracy, right? And that's why I would also not use our current state of political affairs as an argument against democracy in general, because while I agree it's very shitty, I do not like Joe Biden or Donald Trump. We both agree on that. But I would say it doesn't have to be that way. We've let it be that way because of our shitty election laws, the primary process, and just the Constitution not having a very well developed electoral system in place to, deal with these situations. So I would say that just because I have an example of democracy not working doesn't mean I'm not for democracy.
I mean, yeah, sure. I agree with you that like I'm still for like democracy in our electoral process, even though
So
there
to
are
me,
examples of it not working. But also like what you said. Let's go back to like what you said earlier. You were saying like, I would have to make the claim that people don't have the capacity to learn and grow and make these intelligent decisions. I don't think I have to prove that because like I've made it very clear if a worker like wants to be involved in a workplace democracy, they should absolutely have that right to pursue it and to make those decisions. But it shouldn't be forced on everyone. Not everyone even wants that.
well, surely you could come up with a system where you can have workplace democracy, but you don't have to be in a leadership role. I mean, again, you could have representatives, you can have different types of voting. You don't like I work for a union, and I don't have to vote on every single thing or make every single decision. I go to the meetings that pertain to me, or I go to the leadership elections that there's different layers of responsibility you take when you're working with other people. So not everyone's going to be like suddenly forced to be a executive on the board or anything. So I don't know if it's really that dramatic of a thing to worry about.
Our response would be to say you can do that currently. Like you just said, you were in your union. That's good. Like I support that. Then like, what's your problem with the current system?
The current system is that the union has to negotiate with another party over the workplace being run when the union members are the ones that are essentially running the project, right? So like really when I look at what is happening, the people that are making the decisions are inept, and they're just telling union members what to do when the union members are perfectly capable of running the business and doing the right thing without those people. And there's no option to take over that. The system is in place. So
I mean, there is an option. The union could get a loan and they could start like their own firm or their own company. Like everyone in the union could make that decision. That's absolutely an option.
I would say it's not necessarily an option because I don't know how. One, they have to be willing to sell, which I don't know is always the
Oh yeah.
case. And two, I don't know that in our country, that there is like ample opportunity for organizing on that level. I think that it would essentially be busted in some way.
Well, you don't have to make them sell. You just have to create your own thing. But
Well,
right, I
yeah, but
understand.
so you're asking the workers now to take on all this risk despite the fact that they've already put in all the risk for this business, right? So I'm saying that if we want to be
Right,
really
ownership
fair
of a
about it,
business comes with risk.
well, so here's the thing: it comes for risk for both parties. So I've talked about this before with people, and one thing that I always see the capitalist side saying is that ownership comes with risk, so they deserve the fruits of their labor. Well, I would say that working for a person also comes with risk, and so they also deserve part
Of
of those
course it
fruits.
does. Yeah.
But there's no right now; it's all one-sided.
But it's a different type of risk. Like I agree with you, working for someone takes a risk, but it's a different type of risk in that you may be risking, your salary may not be paid or you might be fired, but you're not if you're not going to lose something that you already owned.
Well, so to me,
Generally.
that you're disregarding the stakes there, right? So like losing your job and getting fired is a lot. Generally, I would say is a lot worse than just losing the business. And I would say you wouldn't even necessarily lose the business. Like I don't know if we're going to eject people from having a stake in the business just because we make it a workplace democracy. I think that would be at least. I'm not going to argue for like a socialist system right now, I'll just work within the confines of capitalism. But like, let's say we're going to be social democrats. Like, I don't think we're just going to eject stakeholders from the business.
Okay, so this all goes back to the decision-making process, which is like why I kind of asked you earlier. Do you think that like the workers should directly vote on these things, or do you think they should elect representatives?
I think it depends on the business. Like I said, you said it was situational, and I think I agree with that. I mean, I don't know if we want to go from, like you said, McDonald's employees working at the company to them immediately making decisions about the company. I think they should probably elect representatives or vote on that. I think they would probably agree with that themselves. I don't know if they would even want to just like run a restaurant by themselves. I think most workers, though, most workers have a broad skill base. I think most workers are capable of running a business but without any authority.
Um, you know, I think that's that claim is pretty situational as well. But so let's imagine that let's do a thought experiment. Let's imagine that this workplace democracy exists. Let's imagine that there's this equivalent of McDonald's that runs on workplace democracy. I'm going to now ask you, do you think that would be more or less profitable or well run or efficient than McDonald's itself, something that doesn't run on workplace democracy?
So I have to dissect that question a little bit because one, you're already asking me if it's going to be more profitable or more efficient. I don't know if that really matters in our society, right? Like, it needs to be profitable enough. I don't know if it needs to be more profitable. I care more about if the people are living decent lives, right?
Okay. Then let me change the question. Would it bring in more revenue per worker? Because that's directly related to a salary, which I think we can agree, higher salaries for workers is better.
I would just say it would need to be sustainable, and I would say probably my guess would be yes. I don't know if um I don't know if and I think McDonald's is a dicey example because you're asking me if this company that's already famous would reap in the same revenue, probably. So I don't really know if the ownership would matter much. As far as like any random business, it's going to be, if we're still in the mode of competition, then like it really just depends. I would say it's just as likely that these other businesses will compete efficiently.
I mean, then I think you kind of have your answer. Then I think what you would see is workplace democracies, popping up naturally.
So I think then going forward, the stronger claim would be to give more space and allow that to happen because I don't think we do that. I think that the the way the system works is that money moves things. Money is power, and so it doesn't matter how efficient how well your workplace is doing as a worker democracy, that even the best one is able to be bought out and it turn right back into a capitalist venture. So what the workplace democracy people would be advocating for is a system that does not allow for these kind of transfers of power to happen. There's no monetary incentive because what happens is, um, especially when you get to electing representatives, is that a fraction can always sell out the whole.
Right. I think you actually made a very interesting claim there. So I think, from my opinion, it's, if we had this workplace democracy or co-op or socialist model, I still think it would be the workers' right to, sell their part in the business. A lot of people create businesses not because they expect it to be long-term profitable, but they just want to get the business large enough, and then they want to sell it to a major player.
Yes, that's one of the primary drivers of venture capital now.
So then why don't they have that right? Because for those workers, like you said, they're taking a risk to start that. And if it gets successful enough where they can actually, I'd assume they'd be making some money if they're selling this business to someone else. They put in that work. Why shouldn't they be able to have that right to do that?
I don't know if I've argued that they don't have the right to do that. I think what I'm asking for is that um like the model of ownership is what changes, not necessarily the model of selling the business. I mean, this gets tricky because I'm not really sure like what kind of model we're looking at, but I would say if you're going to design a society to be more socialist, these kind of questions of ownership are going to become more and more invalid. Like you're not even going to consider them. Like you're going to be considering other goods, right? So like right now you want to think like, oh, they should have the right to sell their thing. Well, that right and that question doesn't even make sense in like the kind of socialist society that we're envisioning in that case. Now, if you're talking about more social democratic society, I think that's where your question also gets a little nonsensical because I think we see it in a lot of European countries. Workers have much more democracy, but they're still stakeholders and they're still entities that buy up these companies. They're just done so in a more democratic way, and the government facilitates that democracy. Whereas in the US, I think that owners have nearly all of the um, stake holding and decision making power in companies.
Okay, so you said a couple of things. You said it like in European countries, things happen in a much more.
Oh, you're breaking up.
I have a problem with that. I think that's. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. Can you just repeat what you said?
First, you said that countries, there's, or at least these businesses operate in a more democratic way, and that means that view differently, operate differently. And then you said that the government facilitates that. So the first point, I have no problem with. If that's what happens, and I think honestly that should I don't know. Personally, would I be willing to take a small pay cut to work at a company that practice democracy? I mean, it would depend. Like, if I needed money, maybe not, but if not, maybe I would. So I have no problem with that. The second thing you said was that the government facilitated that. That's more of what I have. Okay, that's more of what I have a problem with. And so can you describe a little bit how the government's facilitated that? And then I can actually say whether I support that or not.
Yeah, I think it's Germany specifically. They mandate a certain amount of workers on the board of executives.
By workers, do you mean just people who work for the company, or do you mean entry level or mid level workers?
I think what it is representatives.
Okay, because I mean, if it's just people who work for the company, I mean CEOs, executives, they're the ones who sit on the boards and they do work for the companies. But if it's
the issue with CEOs is they kind of they don't work for the company. They kind of work what's the word? They work for the stakeholders.
Yeah, that's true. But I would say, I mean, mandating a certain number of representatives, just company elected representatives to be on the board. I mean, I don't know. What if the company elected representatives? I could see how that might be helpful, but I could see how that might be a big conflict of interest.
But these people who are building the business up just to sell it off or to increase the profit margin just so that they can leave and get a bonus and then kind of let the company fail, that's not a conflict of interest. I feel like either way you're going to have conflicts of interest, and I would err towards the people who are planning to stay at the company rather than these kind of ephemeral board positions.
Okay. So let's say you have these representatives on the company. I'm assuming.
Oh, I'm just going to clarify. Jim Goff posted that they're union reps that are on the board, just so you.
Union reps. Okay. I'm actually curious. I can see how that would happen in the USA, because I mean, look at teachers' unions, the police unions. These unions wield an incredible amount of power. So I'm pretty sure that especially in some professions. I mean, look at like the AMA, which is, it's basically an unspoken doctors union. They like literally limit the number of students who go to med school just so they can keep their salaries high. They're wielding an incredible amount of power. So I think that's absolutely possible under the system we have right now.
Sure. And I think that it should continue to go. I think that, I don't think teachers' unions are as powerful as you think. In fact, in Tennessee, they just did a huge union busting move on the teachers. But I think that, yeah, if it's possible, then it should happen. I'm more just arguing that it should happen, not so much that it will or will not happen. But as it stands, I think the state and the business owners have more power and are able to control the workforce more so than the workforce can control the companies. And I think it's an unfair balance of power.
Okay. Yeah, again, you said a couple of things. Like you said, in Tennessee, there's union busting. And I like when we use real world examples. And I would say, I don't agree with that. Like, I'm not super informed about the situation, but I don't think that unions should be busted or broken up. And also, we come back to this balance of power, and you're saying it should be that way. What I'm saying is, if it should be that way, then it'll probably tend to that way. And if that's what happens, then I have no problem with it. But
That seems idealistic, right?
That's a good question. I would say is it a bit idealistic? I'd say it probably is a bit idealistic, but I would also say socialism is a very idealistic ideology. I would say that your position generally, if you are a socialist, is much more idealistic than mine. You are holding a position where there are, in my opinion, a lot of failed examples, and you have faith that it's not going to happen again. That's very idealistic.
So I think it's a
I mean,
different kind of. I agree with you, but I think it's a different kind of idealism. Because the way I approach socialism is that there is a state that I think is the ideal relationship between workers, the means of production, and the value that people get in the spread throughout society. However, I am not necessarily like a revolutionary socialist, like some people on here, and I think their points are valid, and I probably agree with them more than I would you. But that's not really what I view as the right, I guess, praxis is what people would call it, because I
Sure.
don't think that you're going to bring about idealism by like a specific path or a specific plan. I think that you should always just but the thing about idealism is that if you have an ideal relationship in society, you need to bring that about. You need to realize that potentiality. You can't just let it happen or think that there's some process or historical historical materialism where it's just going to come about because of a certain way that you have predicted, right? You need to bring that about. You need to gain the political capital. You need to organize and you need to go out and do that, right? So, and in my belief, not only do we need to know what's right and what the proper relationship should be, that's the role of philosophy, but you also need to bring it about in some way, and that's like political action.
Sure. And like going back to the first question you asked me, which was hypothetically if 90% of workers support a workplace democracy. I mean, if that was true, I think what you were talking about would already happen. I don't think that's true. I don't think 90% of workers, or even probably the majority, or even less than the majority, actually would want that. I mean, you described the relationship between, um, you know, capital, like investors, workers, and companies, and you described that they should have equal power. And I think this gets to more of the heart of the issue between capitalism and socialism. I don't think that they should be forced to have equal power. I mean, what do I view as a good relationship? I view a good relationship in that sense as the workers getting paid higher and higher salaries and having workplace mobility, having a lot of jobs available to them so they can take a job that they want. And if people want workplace democracy, well, then working in a company that offers workplace democracy, but not everyone wants that.
And so I would argue that the society you just described is one, you're missing several features that are necessary for human flourishing, and two, our current system of capitalism does not even bring that about. If you want to address either of those points, we can dissect them.
No, that's good. I think we should hit on both of those. Let's start with the first one. I'm actually curious. What meanings of human flourishing are there? Because, like, I agree, there are things outside of economics that are 100%, I would say, more important than economics, but it's not the role of economics. Like, I don't know, like interpersonal relationships, like all these things. They're so important, but it's not economics. So I think, if you're talking about that, and I'm not sure you are, because I'm asking you the question of what is missing.
I actually think, I'll just stop you for 1 second. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think I do agree that that's kind of what I'm talking about. I agree with you.
Okay.
Economics should not influence interpersonal relationships. I think that's precisely the problem with capitalism.
Okay, I mean, are you talking about like networking?
Well, no, I think the fact that you're calling it networking is illustrating my point, though. I mean,
I mean, that's
interpersonal
fair. I'm like,
relationships interpersonal relationships have suffered under capitalism because capitalism creeps into the personal at every level, right? Businesses have more and more power over our personal lives. And this is starting to turn into a capitalism versus socialism debate, which I didn't necessarily mean to, but
yeah, that's all good. But I think so. I think what you just described is actually true, but I think it's a feature of human nature. I think even if we existed in this like ideal socialist society with workplace democracy, if you're maybe you're a good friend with the union leader, you're probably still gonna be more likely to get the fucking like job at the company. Like I think that's pretty much inevitable. Like people tend to, make relationships and then be, I don't know, like what's the right word? I guess more favorable to people who they're in the relationships with. Like I think that's just how people work, no?
I think to some degree. I mean, I'm not saying that we'll eliminate all human like power dynamics or problems, but I think I do know some things that would change for sure, which would be um like public spaces, for instance, wouldn't be monetized. So like one big issue, and this has been observed since like the 60s, is that the public arena has been gradually destroyed and replaced with like monetized activities, right? So now if you want to go out and like bowl with people or play pool or meet new people, it's almost always the case that you have to pay money and have a community that's facilitated through these monetary transactions rather than one where it used to be where your neighborhood or your community or people with like interests were the ones that you would go out and do these things with. So the community has been disintegrated by capitalism, whereas socialists seek to restore the community in some way. And I can make an almost certain guess that with demonetization in general, there would be less of that kind of thing happening, right?
I mean, I guess that's kind of true. I think like the internet, which was basically created by capitalism, is kind of like a counter to that. Like we're talking right now for free. We joined this Discord channel for free. Like not right now, I'm on vacation, but normally I live in New York City. Like if you go to Bryant Park, Central Park, like there's so much stuff you can do for free. Like you can literally just like walk around the city with people. You can go on a date for free. Like you don't actually have to spend like $50 for a meal, although like most people do. Um, so I wouldn't say it's necessary. Like I'd say you can like, I mean, certain things. I mean, like
Well,
let's say a social aspect. Do you think that should just be all completely free? Like,
so I also live in New York City, and I will say that it
okay,
is it is not the best place to do things for free. I mean, compared to there's just so much to do that I would say that yeah, you can walk around and do stuff, and you can be entertained, but like to actually do community activities, like if you want to go like hang out at a bar, you're gonna be paying what $14 for a drink. Like it's not the place to
that's
like
a
meet
good
people
point,
and like date like I dated in New York City and very expensive is a very expensive thing to do. So I don't know if that's the best example. I know in like my smaller town that I grew up in, it's almost the opposite problem. Is like everyone's
Yeah.
very insular and they don't want to go out, so it's harder to meet people. But there might be more things to do for free. But I would just say that American society overall has just we've kind of disintegrated like the public space, right? And I don't even know that things need to be free necessarily. Like free is not really what I'm going for. I'm more like you all come together, pool in a common amount, and then you do a common communal activity. I feel like that is what has disintegrated.
Oh, I mean, maybe like I've gone on like several of these things where like I don't know, like where you just like everyone pays a certain amount and then they go and all do something together. Like that's still like very prevalent. Like, do you want me to give an example? Or?
You can give an example. I mean, I just have you seen like
Sure.
that
So
that classic like it's a sociology, Bowling Alone or whatever. You
yeah,
heard
I
of
mean,
that?
like no one wants. Sorry. Yeah, no one wants. I mean, like, yeah, sure, no one wants to bowl alone, but
Well, it's not that no one wants to
like,
bowl alone. It's the fact that like the whole infrastructure around bowling leagues has been destroyed by modification of like these kind of competition and social arenas.
I mean, like, like, are you talking about like bowling competitions? I think that's a good thing. Like, it's like competitive spirit, you know, like that's great for
No,
me.
no, it's the idea that like businesses have kind of encroached in on these spaces and turned them into like commodified activities that you pay to get into rather than them being social activities that are like organically spawned.
I mean, I guess, but I'd still say like the whole social aspect of it is like fairly organic. Like you meet someone, say you meet someone new and you're just talking, like you don't have to pay money to like that person. Like it's just natural.
I would say you don't have to pay money to like people. I'm not arguing that you can't meet people anymore. I'm saying that like communities are now more structured and organized around a monetary basis rather than around a kind of like local community that has a common interest in that community. I'll give you an example too, because we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
New York. You see a lot of these like apartment buildings. They come up. I think Denizen's a big one now, where like that apartment becomes the community, and you're almost paying to like live in that kind of community. So rather than turning that neighborhood that traditionally has been the source of community into what it could be, you're rather paying to live in this closed in like micro neighborhood within the community.
I mean, I feel like that's kind of inevitable. I mean, like in socialism, people are still going to be living in different neighborhoods. You know, like that's just geographic proximity. Like, and it doesn't guarantee that you're going to find community. Like, if you're just like an antisocial person or you have a hard time, like having money may help you, but it may not. Like, you have to like put yourself out there and actually like do things. You know, like talk to people.
Sure, but I even think the term antisocial, I think that is something that
Yeah,
has
that
spawned.
that may have been a bad term to use just because it's like a bit condescending. That's my bad.
Well, it's
But
condescending,
yeah,
but I also wonder if it's a more modern conception that capitalism has kind of brought about. It's kind of like I mean, I guess there's always been loners or like people that go against the grain, but I think traditionally everyone's considered part of the community. You have to like transgress the laws to be outside of the community, right? Like you have to be exiled or like revoke citizenship. Whereas now it's
yeah.
kind of this phenomena where like if you don't have the right personality or like people just don't like your style or your vibe, you're kind of like distanced, you're antisocial. So I think that's more of a modern thing to have happen. And I think it's also a negative thing.
I mean, you know, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you as a negative thing, but you know, I'm not sure I'd say that's modern. Like, you know, you like the way I see it, like people are always gonna like go out, meet people, talk to each other, and like some people you're gonna hit it off with, some others you're not going to. Like that's kind of just life. Like even looking back in like the Middle Ages, I'm sure there are neighbors that liked each other and didn't. Like,
I think the
I
difference though is that you weren't considered antisocial just because you like didn't.
I'm sure they had a different word for it back then, but I'm sure the same conception still existed.
Well, no, I think the conception was different because everyone was considered part of one, a universal community, right? The church. And then they were considered part of their local community, the fiefdom or lords that you rule, like that area, the geographical area, I guess. And
Yeah,
then you're
yeah.
also considered part of your microcosm, which is the community itself, the small community that you live in, your local community. And you would have to transgress like a very serious law. And I mean, some of them are stupid. I'll grant you that, like atheism, for instance, right? But like, you'd have to transgress like a very serious law to be considered outside the community. Now I feel like people are considered outside. Like the onus on the people is to prove that they ought to be in the community, rather than just extending it to them naturally. Rather than the fact that you have to like do something in order to become outside of the community. So I
Yeah,
think the
yeah.
relationship has been
No, that's good.
inverse.
No, that's good. I think you're hitting on something that may be a bit more modern, like this whole like subculture stuff. Like, and I'll give an example that I just saw like today. And I'm not, like I'm not, don't see me as this like throwing shade or anything, but like,
Mhm.
there are some people who are like their communities are very into anime, or they're very into like sports or something. Like, I don't see a problem with that. It's just like shared interests. Like, if you want to be in a community that say cares a ton about like college basketball or just basketball in general, like you would have to at least like know something about basketball, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I agree with you that there are these communities, but I think that's kind of pretty organic. And also, you said like back in the Middle Ages, like there's a church community. Like, I think that's absolutely still completely possible today. Like, it's completely free to join a church. Like, churches actually want you to join them.
I'm not saying that, but I also think that church is not how we organize society anymore, right? So, like in the medieval ages, the church was almost the society. It's the primary mode of education, of like basically of citizenship, because the state didn't really exist. So
I mean,
I don't know if there's like a direct parallel with the church now and then. And I agree with you. Like, I mean, I wouldn't join a church because it's not my proclivity, but I don't know if it's bad to join a church. I think a lot of people do that when they're desperate and that's their last option. But that's not really proof of concept for me. But I think it's interesting because you also kind of get at what I'm trying to say here when you're bringing up like sports or anime as like communities, because those are not communities. Those are like hobbies that you share. So like the fact that that has replaced community is what is disturbing to me.
oh yeah, that's. I mean, I guess that's pretty interesting. I guess hitting on your church thing first, like church is still like a very small community. Like, I'm a Christian. Like, you can like, for example, like someone in your church might be able to give you like a job offer or something like that. Like, it's still, I'd say it's still a very strong community. It certainly like doesn't influence legislation, but I mean like separation of church and state. Personally, I'm not against that. Like, I think you're getting into dangerous territory when you start to legislate religion, and I say that as a religious person. Um, but also you like this. I'm not sure. Like, is like these commute. I would say it's not just having the interest that puts you into the community. I'd say it's like I mean, like, sure, just liking anime does not make you part of a community. But if you come together with a group of people who like anime, like you know, I don't have experience with this personally, but I'm sure there's like got to be some sort of community feeling between those people, and it might lead you to like genuine like friendships and stuff. Like, how is that a bad thing? Like, I don't see that as a bad thing.
Um, yeah, so we have to disaggregate what we're calling bad. I don't think it's bad to find community in anything. Like we're humans, we need to find community where we can find community. That's just our nature to be flourishing. To bring this term back up, human beings, we need to find community.
Yeah.
What I think is that in some way we have been kind of alienated from the way that we actually exist in nature because of capitalism. There's now this thing between us and the principles that organize human relations, and that's capital. And so I think we get uh, we get organized around like these kind of, I guess I would say, superficial or like advertised to us kind of things. And so if you do not want to be part of that, or um even to like think outside of that paradigm, it's very hard now in a modern society to do that because we're just so inundated in these certain select choices that we've been given by, I guess, just the commodification and conglomeration of all these media enterprises, that when you say communities, like, it doesn't feel so much about as much as what I would call a community, which is like a group of disparate people coming together to work towards a common goal, as much as a almost like a pleasure device where like I'm paying to have friends in this social circle. And like, again, like I said, you need friends, and I'm not disparaging anyone to get friends in any way that they can, but I don't think that this is the proper relationship between you and other people to just be organized around like a hobby. I think that there should be some more organic way of that coming about.
I mean, yeah, I think, I mean, I agree with some of that. I disagree with others, but I think, I don't think it's like the hobby is the community. I think the hobby serves to initially connect people. And then once you're connected, then you'll actually start to build community. Like maybe you're on a basketball team with someone um, in high school and college, or just like you join a rec league as an adult. And, there's one person on your team that you like feel you'd be good friends with. And then it doesn't become about basketball. It becomes like you guys just like, and you also said like community is like working together to achieve a common goal. Like, I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, you can still be in community and just like enjoy spending time with each other, or just, I don't know, like you can't like force these types of things. Like you can't. I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like you're getting into dangerous territory when you force like these types of things. Like it goes back to like the whole like I don't know. You get into some like weird ideologies. You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't think that it does. I think that's actually fairly mundane what I'm saying because, like I said, when obviously there's no problem working with people that have other interests and then you discovering that you have a friendship. But to me, what has happened is that has become the only outlet because so much of our lives, our political lives, our social lives have been outsourced to these companies. And so they have more control over that kind of thing than we do ourselves, right? You like need spaces, other people own it. You need a forum to communicate with other people, like Facebook, whatever. They are the ones that have monopolized that communication power. And so we always are filtered
Oh
through
yeah, I get it.
we're always filtered through these other things in order to do these things. Now, again, I don't think you should force people to have a common goal. What I'm saying is that we should have a society that allows people to have a common goal and it's facilitated without having to go through the medium of someone else. I don't think that's true freedom.
Okay. Yeah, I think I understand a bit better more. I think like if I'm understanding correctly, you're more talking about like social media and stuff, which I understand because it's
Not just
like
social media,
imagine
but landlords and rents and public venues like disappearing over time, being privatized.
okay. Yeah, I'm like public venues being privatized. I mean, there's still like a lot of public venues you can go to. Like I'd say if you're trying to like meet someone and go out, like you have a ton of options, especially in like New York City. Like
Well, yeah, you have
I don't
like
know.
parks, but even there's literally parks that in Manhattan that are like locked behind keys that you have to rent a shitty, expensive apartment to go to, and it's only getting worse.
That's fair. I mean, I would say like I mean, look at the people who actually live in those apartments. Like, are they any like more? Do they have any more real community than just like other people? I'm not sure they do.
I mean, I don't know. I'll probably never meet those people, but I would
I mean, I've met a
say,
lot of those people, and in my experience, they don't.
yeah. No, I was about to say though. I would say probably not because I think the thing I'm talking about applies to the rich and to the poor equally. I think the issue is that there's
Okay.
a medium of the commodity between people, right? Not that you don't have enough money to do things necessarily. It's also that like it has changed the way that we have interactions with people.
I mean, I guess that's like kind of reasonable. Like the way people have interacted have certainly changed since like I don't know, like the 1950s, 1960s, like before the internet and everything. But like,
I'm
is
not even
that
talking
really
about
a bad
that.
thing?
No, because I'm not even talking about just from because capitalism existed then too. So like to idealize that era as a socialist would be
Right,
absurd.
right, right. And I'm
That's
not
like
trying to do
like
that. I'm not trying to
the
do that.
60s I would say is like the height of capitalism too, right?
Okay. Um. Yeah, I get like. I think you're getting into more territory where it's like, sure, it can be like I'm not. It's very hard to like find genuine community, but I don't think that capitalism is stopping it. I mean, like, I don't know. I just don't see like if you are like genuinely connected to someone, it's not so much about economics. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, I'm not saying capitalism stops community or that it even has the power to stop all community. I would uh
I mean, does it? If like capitalism is incentivized to like these social, like you were talking about the bowling thing, like bowling alleys are incentivized to bring people in and help people make connections so that they get return customers. Like if they're having these events specifically so that people can meet each other, is that like in that way it almost seems like capitalism is I wouldn't say helping, but it's definitely not hurting.
I guess I lost this train of thought because one, I'm making the claim that capitalism harms social relationships, but I don't say that it destroys them. I think that would be very hard to do, right? Like, if not impossible. I can maybe imagine situations, but I don't. It would be like a very alien world to what we live in. So I don't think that's happening. I just think
I
that it harms social relationships.
yeah,
And
yeah. I
two,
think
the way that you're describing the bowling alleys, I think perfectly encapsulates the point, right? Like now the bowling alley is the thing that is organizing things. Like the capital structure is what organizes our daily lives. It's not us. There's no onus on us. And I think that's a problem of vision, right? So like we have lost the vision of us creating our own lives and bringing it back to workplace democracy. I think workers themselves begin to feel removed from their product and their possibilities and potentials as humans. And so they are not going to be able to bring these things about unless we enable them through political change to do that in some way, right? Because we have created a system where it's an uphill battle for you to have any kind of democracy. You have to have money to have democracy. The more money you have, the more democracy you have. And that to me is not a just or equitable system.
I mean I guess like the whole like money buys democracy thing. I mean kind of. I mean I'm not sure, but you know, going
Well, you
back to
already
what you
said
were
it.
saying earlier, like
You said it earlier. You said that if you want
sure, tell
to
me what I
be
said.
a workplace democracy, the workers should buy the company. That's what you said.
Right, but that's in the context of like workplace. But in the government, it kind of works the same way too.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
in just like an interpersonal relationship, it doesn't have to work the same way.
It doesn't have to, but it does. Like so, like yes, there is like there's always other options, right? But it becomes harder and harder as society coalesces around a certain structure of interacting. Sorry, right? So like an example would be going out to the movies, right? Like in the 90s when everyone was going out to the movies, it was very easy to go. Now it's very hard to go. So like and
I
it's
mean,
very
I don't think
hard.
it's hard to go.
What?
I don't
Well,
think it's that hard
well,
to go out to the
well,
movies.
it's become more and more expensive, like relative to what people make.
Oh,
Yeah, and not only that, but there's also like less and less options as corporations have monopolized. So like you kind of have like a handful of types of movies that get made now. So what I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah.
is that capitalism now limits your options rather than like there being a fully functional like artistic community out there, it has been engulfed into this specific structure where certain things are made and there's a certain barrier of entry to it, right?
I mean, I don't think that's true. Let me give you an example about like the movie thing. Like, you're making the decision to go out to the movie theater. You could also stay at home and use like Soap Today and pirate the same movie online literally for free. Then you're paying zero. So like even then, there's another
Well,
option that's completely free.
well, I mean, I don't know if piracy that's an extra legal option. I don't know.
In my opinion, that'd be like a legitimate option that you could do. I mean, if you're trying to have a movie night with someone, yeah, like why not pirate it?
I wouldn't say that's a legitimate option, but I see what you're saying, and there are options, right? You can like watch streaming services or whatever. But even then, like you have more and more people filtering what we can see because there's more power at the top that's deciding what's being made.
I mean, isn't that true? Like regardless. I mean,
No,
even
I mean, over time, I mean, so at the height of I guess the union movement in America, like most artists were in some kind of guild or union, and that's gradually eroded over time. So you have more sterile, like corporate media that's taken over, and also there's been a lot of erosion of like
people like,
law.
I mean, you may call it like sterile corporate media, but if that's what people enjoy watching, like what's the problem with it?
Well, I don't know if I mean that's what the options are, so I don't even know if that's what they enjoy watching, right? It's like from my
Right, but if they
perspective,
enjoy watching,
all I see is people complaining about the same Marvel movies being made over and over again. I don't I don't see much like interest in things that are going on. I think that's why revenue and viewership has gone down for all these movies.
exactly. And if they don't like them, like that's a good thing. Like you can literally open up YouTube and TikTok. Like we're literally, like I'm not sure if it's actually going to be made, but if it goes through, this like video of us talking is going to be a YouTube video. Like people can choose to watch that instead of corporate media. So I still like, you have so many things to choose from. Like I see the problem you're saying, but I don't think it's actually. Um, I'm not sure it's actually there. You know.
I don't even know if choice is necessarily the good thing, right? So like choice is good in the sense that like you should be able to choose between different options. I don't think having more choices is necessarily a good, right? It's like a contingent good because it depends on um, if those choices that are being added are beneficial or not. So to
Okay,
me,
so then
the ideal would be to like empower people to create the things that they want to see or they like the common good that their community wants to pursue. That would be better than just having the choice between these different options that they don't necessarily want. So I think there's almost like an illusion going.
exactly. So don't you see how that could be applied to workplace democracy? Maybe workers don't want these choices. Maybe they don't want to waste their time, not waste their time, but maybe they don't want to spend all this time making these choices. Maybe they just want to work at their jobs.
Well, so one, I don't think that's true, and two, I think that there's again different levels of that. And I think if you ask workers if they want some say in their democracy, or sorry, if they want, let me back up. If they want some say in their workplace, they would probably say yes. If they want to run their workplace, they would probably say no. There's always going to be a middle ground in there. So I would say it's fairly obvious to me that they would obviously want some say in what their workplace does,
So
at
that,
least at the level of how like they interact with the workplace.
right, that makes sense. So couldn't they like work in a small private company where maybe there's just 10 employees, and then they're going to have a large
Well,
say in what the company is?
I mean, I don't know how, if you've looked for jobs before, but like you don't have that much
I have.
say. You don't have that much say over what job you get. Like you have to work, and unless you have parents that are willing to support you or family or I guess a partner or something, like you kind of have to just take the job that you get, and then you have to look for new jobs while you're at it. But
Yeah, that's true.
that gets dicey because if you keep moving around jobs until you find the ideal one, you're just kind of like get viewed negatively in our society.
I mean, I guess that's fair. Like if you put a lot of jobs on your resume, yeah. But like you can apply to hundreds, thousands of places. Like there's no limit to the amount of jobs you can seek out.
Yeah, and so I mean, you can apply to hundreds of thousands, but you'll probably get called back for a handful, and even those, it's like the onus is
So
on.
this is actually a really good point. So now, if we're letting workers make the decisions that control the company, wouldn't it even be harder to get a job? Because now they're going to make now the people who are already in the company are going to say, we're only going to hire people who we think not only can do the job well, but on top of doing the job well, we need to be able to trust them to make a good decision. So, like from my perspective, that makes the problem even worse.
No,
Even
I
worse.
mean, I would say not. I would say it would be the same.
How
If
come?
I would say that's the same, if not less, because if you have, because like right now, the way that you're hired is like, I would say ultimately it's if you fit the corporate culture. But I think if they hired people based on if you can do the job and not if you're like fitting the culture of the environment, then I think that more people would be more likely to be hired for more jobs. But not only that, but I would also say that given that, um, at worst, you could say that a democratic workplace would have a similar issue in that you would hope that the person you're hiring has a similar vision for the company. But even then, I don't know because I don't know how much the average worker actually has to participate in the workplace. You just have to give them the option. So I just don't know if it would really be that big of an issue.
I mean, I think it would be. I mean, and even now, like the the selectivity of a job that you take is based on your credentials, your experience, your education, like your past results. I think that's going to be the same thing as they have as it would be in like if most places were workplace democracy. But I'll reiterate, like you say, company culture. Like I guess in small companies that make more of a difference because then it's more important to know people. But we're getting back to the point where then small companies are going to be even more guarded because they're going to be like, they're going to be on the inside saying, we're the ones who are making this decision. If we hire this guy, he might influence a bad decision. Like, do you at
Uh,
least see the problem that I'm trying to raise?
you know, I'm just gonna be honest and say no, I don't. I think these kind of decisions are gonna like play out the way they play out. I just don't see any causal factors in how hard it is to get a job or not. I mean, ultimately, I think that
I mean,
I'm more
sometimes
con-
it's hard for some people to get jobs. For other
well,
people, it's very easy to get jobs.
I think ultimately what I'm arguing is like I'm more concerned about the people on the job having more democracy in the workplace. I mean, it would depend on your system and what you're doing to like make it a more effective workforce or like giving people opportunities for careers.
Well,
I
yeah,
don't I don't know I
let
don't
me
know
give
if
you
the
an example.
structure of the system has that much to do with getting a job.
Okay, let me give you an example. It actually has to. I'm not sure how much you know about this, but let's look at big law firms. Um, and you live in New York City, so you might know a bit about this. Let's look at big law firms. It's actually pretty easy to just get a job if you're a lawyer and you went to a good law school. Fairly easy to actually get a job there. What's incredibly difficult is becoming a partner. And if you,
Yeah,
what a partner
I
means
know.
is this: you can actually choose the direction of the company, and you actually have an equity stake. And so it's a lot harder to become a partner, which actually has workplace democracy and owns a part of the company, than it is. Oh shit! Someone just pulled in front of me. To just work there. So this is exactly the problem I'm trying to raise. So you see, it's much more difficult. So if you're saying like it's hard to get a job now, you have to apply to hundreds of places. I mean, sure. I mean, it depends on what the job market is, and like this is very situational. But whatever it is, I think it would be a lot worse if there was workplace democracy.
I'm just not buying it. And I also like from what I've known a few people that do the law firms in New York and they're very exploitative. You're getting like severe underpayment for the hours that you put in and all for this like promise of a position as a partner, and it's pretty much at will whether you get it or not. So I'm not buying that too much. I would say there's almost there's no way that you're gonna make like people being hired into a company better so long as like the hiring process is what it is now. Like you have to change that entire system to make it more equitable. And that's not really to me a workplace issue, like how the workplace is organized, whether it's workers running it or capitalists running it or whatever you want to call it. To me, that's more of an issue of like, is there a base social provision for you to not have to take whatever job is available to you? Yeah, no. I think we lost hydrogen. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the debate there.
Wait, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, you're back. Okay. No,
Okay.
I could not hear you.
Yeah, I'm like driving around, so my connection may be a bit spotty. I'm trying to like get someplace. But what I'm saying is, imagine like hiring in a workplace democracy. Say there's like 100 people. Do the majority of the 100 people have to like vote? Because I'm assuming workplace democracy extends to who is hired. So wouldn't that make the process even more convoluted? Because now a lot of people have to agree to hire you. And what if like there are always going to be biases in that process?
Sure, there's gonna be biases in any processes. I mean, you're just trying to restore like democracy to something, and there's still gonna be problems with that. And I guess I don't know if you heard it or not, but I was saying some of those issues about the job market are more concerned with like giving people basic necessities so that they're not forced or coerced into any job that they need to survive, but rather giving them options.
I think that's fair. I think that's definitely fair. You know, I'd consider myself a capitalist. I'd also consider myself a liberal capitalist. I'm
Mhm.
definitely open to those types of, those types of welfare, those types of social programs. I agree with you there. But I think that's a completely, and I think you may be right in that by giving people a certain base, whether that be through universal basic income or just, I don't know, like right now we kind of do it through unemployment insurance, which may not be as strong as you would like it. But I do agree with you that giving people some amount of a base can help. But that's a completely, like, in my opinion, that's a completely different issue than forced workplace democracy.
Well, that's my argument is that forced workplace democracy or like hiring committees or like a business owner, capitalist business owner hiring you, the issues that you're concerned with are separate to me. They're actually in the sphere of how do we give people more options to choose their workplace, not so much in this realm of like how should we organize the workplace.
I mean, no, but the two affect each other. Like they're going to affect each other.
Sure. I mean, but I would say that you need to give people more ability to choose where they work and also more ability to choose um, how the workplace operates, right? And so you have to bring about both in some way. And yeah, there's going to be problems. I mean, I don't, any, like, throwing any concerns about problematic issues in these given scenarios doesn't really concern me because I mean, you would have to have it like be debilitating for me to be worried about it. I just
I
don't.
mean,
I don't
okay,
really.
well,
I just don't really know where you're going with it because yeah, there's issues now. There probably will be issues with any system. I mean, that's a given. I just don't.
sure. I mean, I can tell you kind of where I'm going with it, and then, yeah, I think we should wrap up. But
Okay.
where I'm going with it is it may not be economically or financially viable to do both of those things or even one of those things. Like there's only like okay, economics is about, you have unlimited or essentially unlimited demand and limited resources. Like you're not going to get everything you want. And workplace democracy, in my opinion, that's going to lead to like lower profits, lower economic growth, and you're actually going to like lose some of this freedom you have now.
I guess I just don't know how to respond to that. I would have to say that's an empirical claim, and I don't know what would be the causal factor between
Yeah,
democracy
that's fair.
in the workplace and there being lower revenue for individual workers. To me, the only thing that you would see is maybe a decline in like GDP or like stock prices or things like that, which are like operate on the value of the business as a whole rather than like the actual
Sure.
revenue that the workers are bringing in.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I
maybe,
think
I mean,
if we were trying to, I think it would be, we both came into this debate with, at least I didn't do much, if any, research or like get statistics. So, if we both had that, that'd be great. Then we could have more of a discussion. But
right.
yeah, I think we got to a good place, and I think we can wrap up now if you're good with it.
Yeah, I think we both presented our visions and what we think would come about, and people can judge from maybe not necessarily a empirical standpoint, but like which sounds more probable, I guess. So I'm good with that.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if the moderator wants to say anything, but yeah, um, yeah, thanks guys, and I'll mute myself now.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the cordial debate too.
Yeah, man, for sure. Like, I think we were both actually very civil, which I think, and yeah, that's great.
All right, good talking to you. I'm gonna end the recording now.
Yeah, see you guys.
All right. So anyone else is feel free to jump in at this point. I'm